put that thing back in its holster. We haven't gone anywhere.
I don't understand.
Check out the MichaelDukesShow.com for information on how to get access to the podcast.
Welcome to the party, pal.
The Michael Dukes Show.
The greed and the entitlement is astounding to me.
What more could you want from a low-budget radio program?
This is a dumpster fire.
That was just BS.
It is time to get a new perspective.
We know just what you need, and we've got just the cure. Open wide and prepare for a steaming hot cup of freedom.
I just don't fathom it.
The Michael Dukes Show, streaming live across the world.
Across the world and across the state of Alaska, here on your favorite radio station and or translator around the interwebs at michaeldukeshow.com. It is this little low-budget radio show we like to call The Michael Dukes Show. Hi, how are you? And welcome to it. Tuesday. And that means, of course, we've got our deep dive today. We're going to get into that here in just a second. Want to welcome you all to the program and hope that you are staying, keeping your head above water, keeping your heads about you with all the runaround and everything else that's going on in the world. Some crazy stuff happening. And we are happy that you are joining us here yet again on the big radio broadcast, and we appreciate that. So Tuesdays, that means that we will start off the show with headlines this morning, and then we are going to dive into it with our friend Brad Keithley, who, of course, is the founder and director of Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets. He'll be joining us by Zoom here shortly, and we will be talking with him about, all the stuff that's fit to print. All the stuff that's fit to print, including we're going to talk about House Finance's proposed budget, their new proposed budget, and, of course, their plan for the energy rebate. Hopefully you can hear the air quotes on that. Energy rebate, which is just another way. I think Kathy Tilton called it reindeer games. I call it pochoir is what I call it. It's a bunch of smoke and mirrors for them to try and pay us a larger dividend without actually calling it a dividend, because that would be essentially, with the current PFD, which they're discussing right now, $1,250 is what they're talking about, and $1,250 plus the $1,300 energy rebate would then equal the governor's proposed $2,500 permanent fund dividend, which would match the 50-50 plan, which is still not anywhere near what the statutory dividend should be. I mean, I'm just going to say that right out of the gate. Right, just $4,200 is what the dividend is, what it's supposed to be. That's the statutory amount. And our leaders, our elected leaders, and our politicians just can't find it in their heart of hearts to follow the law. Hashtag follow the damn law. They can't find it in their hearts to follow the law and give Alaskans what they are owed per statute and the Constitution. And they instead are going to choose for us. I mean, it's so generous of them to choose for us what those monies should go to. That's what's happening. Because we just ask for too much. That's what's going on here. We just ask for too much because don't you know that there are state programs out there that need funding?
The greed and the entitlement is astounding to me. I just don't fathom it.
Yeah, I know. I know you don't fathom it. I'm sorry that we are so ungracious about this. I'm sorry that we Alaskans would like to have our money in our hands to spend how we see fit. I'm just sorry that that's so hard for you to understand. I mean, come on. Come on. Yesterday, Alaska North Slope crude tripping up over $114 a barrel. Drudge reporting right now that if we decide to cut off Russian gas and oil, which is that's the direction that everything seems to be heading, the saber rattling at the Kremlin included threats of, if that happens, there'll be $300 a barrel oil, which I guess would be good for the state of Alaska and bad for all of us. I mean, anybody filled up their gas tank here in the last few days? Oof. Oof, man. $5 and whatever it was, 20 cents a gallon that I paid for premium the other day. I mean, that's a significant chunk. And it's only going to go up from here. This oil today hit a historic high, or yesterday hit a historic high. Numbers we have not seen since, I guess, 2014, 2013, 2012. Alaska North Slope crude yesterday peaked out. I saw it at 114, but apparently it peaked out at $120 a barrel. Remember, that's when we got that $1,200 energy rebate from Sarah Palin, in addition to a full statutory dividend. I mean, could you imagine every man, woman, and child in this state getting the $4,200 statutory dividend and an energy rebate on top of it? You know, I'd be fine. Keep the energy rebate. Don't do that. Just pay us the statutory dividend. What kind of difference would that make in your family? What kind of difference would your finances see if you received the money that was owed to you? What would it take? Family of four, right? Family of four gets what, $17,000? Family of six? Oof. All of a sudden, now you're talking about real money. Kids could buy a car so they could drive back and forth to their jobs. They could put some money away in the bank so that they've got stuff covered. They could pay first and last rent. I mean, am I asking for my kids to move out? Maybe. Maybe that would be good. I mean, gas is already over $5 a gallon here in here in the South Central area, down in Anchorage. I bought gas on Friday, and it was, again, $5 and change for premium. Drudge had some pictures yesterday up of a local gas station that had gas at $6.70 a gallon. And here we've got the Muppet in Chief who's decided to cut off all oil exports from Alaska and stop all projects and basically kneecap our energy independence here in this country to appease a few tree-hugging warm and fuzzies down there, that somehow we're going to rape and pillage the beautiful, pristine Alaskan boreal tundra, ice and snow-covered tundra, essentially, which I'm sure everybody's rushing up to view immediately right now. And now, here we sit with Alaska's, on the end of a almost 2 year now shutdown of everything that's going on, and other places scrambling to figure out how they're going to fill the gap. I mean, Russia provides 40% of the natural gas for Europe. 40%, let alone their oil and their crude exports. So if you do cut them off, where's that going to come from? Well, it could come from Alaska. But remember, they've been shutting us down for 2 years. It could take 2 years to get everything spun back up, only for them to change their mind yet again. Do you think any private investor is really going to be like, oh, yeah, let's play on again, off again with these guys. Let's play chicken with these guys. They could decide to do it, and then, I mean, this is insane. But they're going to deign to give us a $1,300 energy rebate check. So they've already talked about it. They've already fixed the price of the dividend. As it's written right now, the budget would pay a dividend of roughly $1,250 and an energy relief check of $1,300, which just happens to coincide with the amount of the 75-25 split that all the Democrats and all the business as usual scumbag Republicans have decided that that's what they wanted to set. Now, remember, it wasn't but 4 years ago that Bert Stedman said that, that 50-50 plan, that's the way to go.
That was just BS.
And now, of course, now he says it's just, no, it's got to be 75-25. Because we can't control how we spend. We just can't control how we spend. And so we couldn't possibly do that. We couldn't possibly live on the 50-50. Even though really it would be short term because, as you can see, they're already talking about, even before this whole Russia-Ukraine thing blew up, even before that, they were talking about how in projections in about 8 years, the government would have more money than Croesus, but it's okay. I mean, this is how it works. All those people in there who just, folks, they just know better than you. If you would just shut up and sit down, they could tell you how it would be, how the best way to live your lives would be. Just be happy. Just be happy. Just be happy with what you've gotten. It's all fine. Yeah. Well, here we sit, wondering where we go from here. Anyway, did I get sidetracked this morning. So the first topic is going to be the proposed House finance budget. The second topic of the weekly top three is going to be the role inflation is going to play in our budgetary future. And the third topic for the top three is going to be campaign finance reform, or the lack thereof here in the state, specifically the fact that that there is no limit right now, that there is no contribution limit to politicians. And how do we feel about that, and how does that affect us? So Brad Keithley is going to take all three of those on. Then in hour two, we'll pick it up with our positivity guru, Chris Story, and God knows we're going to need that based on how I'm feeling this morning already. But that's where it is. That's today's show. And then we'll pick it up in the meanwhile. We'll do some stuff at the top of hour two and at the bottom of, or the end of hour two. We'll do some open line. We'll do some talk. We'll do some stuff. We'll take your calls. We'll see what you have to say. But this is where we're at, folks. We just couldn't possibly know exactly how we should spend our money. We need those politicians to help us because we are not smart enough to roll and create and do our own thing with our own money. They have to control it. Okay. Well, I guess that maybe I should just go out and camp in the wilderness until the world ends, and then I'll come back and we'll make something new. I mean, at what point do you realize you can't unpickle a pickle, right? Maybe you just go get yourself a new cucumber. Maybe that's what we need to do around here. I'm not sure. All right, we got more coming up. Brad Keithley up next, The Michael Duke Show. Common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio.
If you missed the show, you can listen to it on your time with Dukes On Demand. Oh, and it's free. Like America used to be. Streaming live every weekday morning on Facebook Live and MichaelDukesShow.com.
Okay. Hello. How are you? You guys ready to do this? To rock and roll? Man, I mean, I'm just, at some point, I just a little chapped about this whole deal. All right, let me see if I can get Brad Keithley on the line here. Come on. There we go. Okay, we're getting Brad Keithley all set up. And looks like I'm connected, he's connected, we're all connected. Cuckoo, cuckoo. I am the walrus. Well, I'm not the walrus, but I'm something. Anyway, it looks like Brad Keithley is now in the chat room with us. Hello, my friend. How are you doing?
Michael, I'm doing great today. Scumbag Republicans?
Sorry, I got a little carried away there, but that's kind of how I'm kind of
on a roll.
That's how I'm feeling this morning, Brad. I mean, it's just like at what point in your life do you just go, okay, we get it. You know better than us how to run this, how to do all this, no matter what everybody says, no matter the hours of testimony in another direction, no matter anything else, you know better than us. I mean, at what point do we just, at what point do we just start throwing our hands in the air and start swinging?
No, I'm with you. I just have never verbalized it that way before. I was impressed that you got on that much of a roll.
Well, I don't usually get down into demeaning, ad hominem attacks, but at this point, it's not a straw man. It's a real deal. It's concerning.
I got to admit, I'm impressed by the donut though this morning. What is with the donut?
This is for my friends over there at Donut King. You can't see it; it's upside down. But Donut King, Cindy over there, Donut King, gave me this shirt, and they make some amazing donuts out there in Wasilla. And so she gave me the shirt, and I told her I would rep the shirt. This is a while ago. I've worn this several times, but I don't know. I was feeling very donut-y today. I could really use a donut today. I'll be honest with you.
I got to admit, I like the dark, and the beer just sort of comes, rushing out of the darkness. It's good. It's a good look.
It's not as good as my pink shirt. Everybody gives me a hard time about my pink shirt, which my breast cancer awareness shirt, but. Yeah, I'm not normally a kind of a darks guy. I like to wear a little bit of color, but you're right. Now I just look like a floating head in the darkness with a donut hovering under my chin. It's just a reminder. I
just about snorted my coffee on that one.
It's just a reminder that donuts are with us always. So it's all good. It's all good. All right, well, we're about 90 seconds out right now, and I've got you all up on the screen and everything on my end here. I haven't pushed you over to the crowd yet, but we'll be right back to you, okay, Brad? So hold the line for just a second. Brad Keithley, our guest, Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets, and we're going to be joined by him here in just a hot second. I got him potted back down. He's on hold in the virtual green room, eating virtual donuts instead of real ones, like the ones on my shirt. I mean, it's not really a real donut, but somebody else asked about my donut shirt this morning in the chat room, too. So, yes, it is a donut with sprinkles on my shirt this morning. So, anyway, somebody needs to go out to King's Donuts and get me some donuts this morning. Maybe I need to get me some King's Donuts this morning. All right. What else we got here? We may have Brad comment on this comment about the $300 a barrel oil. Now, that's Russian. That's the Russian foreign minister, so he's trying to stir up some scare. But I don't see a problem with oil reaching $200 a barrel in the short term. What does it mean long term? Maybe we'll talk with him about that as well. And everything else this morning. Make sure that you like and follow the show page here on Facebook. And make sure that you share the video this morning, whether you're on Facebook or on YouTube. Make sure you share the video, and then if you're on YouTube, make sure you hit the subscribe button and ring the bell as well. So you'll get notifications every morning when we go live, because we know that's important, right? That's important stuff. All right. Brad Keithley, our guest, The Michael Duke Show. Let's do it. Okay, welcome back to the program. We're continuing now. It is Tuesday, the beginning of our weekly top three. Brad Keithley, Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets, comes on board with us to share. Today we're talking about the House finance budget, inflation, campaign finance reform, the whole kit and caboodle. Let's jump into it with him here. He's joining us today. We're trying something new via Zoom instead of Skype. I think it's going to be better. We'll see. We'll see how it goes. Good morning, my friend. How are you doing this morning?
Michael, I'm doing great today. How about you?
I'm doing good. I'm doing real good. So
I've wiped off the coffee that I was snorting out when you were talking about your Donut King.
My Donut King. I'm wearing a Donut King shirt today, and so I've got a donut on my chest here, and people were like, "What's all with the donut?" I want a donut, damn it. That's what it is. I got up this morning. And I said, what do I want this morning? I want a donut. So instead of eating one, I put on my donut shirt, and that's fine.
Doesn't that go Terry?
Yeah, to Terry. Well, she's asleep. I mean, nobody wants to wake her. Nobody wants to wake up Sleeping Beauty at 4:00 in the morning. All right. I want her to be as rested as possible. All right. Well, let's dive into it here this morning. Let's talk about. Well, I guess I was just kind of riffing on it. The House Finance produced budget, $1,250 PFD, $1,300 energy rebate, which, again, is just all a bunch of, voodoo. It's all a bunch of accounting voodoo where they're pulling from a different account and they're saying, well, this equals what the governor wants. It just doesn't give you what the governor said it was, and so thereby denying him any kind of win or leverage in this. Give me your take on it.
Well, and you made a good point earlier. It's still, I mean, even you add those two together, it's still $1 billion short of what the statutory PFD is. I've done a chart that if I'm any good at this anymore, I'm going to try to put up on the screen that would, let's see, start sharing. There we go. You may see it from your end, I hope. Are we good?
We're good. Go ahead.
Okay. So this chart charts the total budget, the total UGF budget, and the PFD over the last several years. It starts in FY20 and takes us through what the House Finance Committee has proposed for this year. The FY20 budget was $4.49 billion. That's sort of the recent low. That was the next to last Walker budget. And then the last Walker budget ramped up from the $4.49 billion up to $4.81 billion. The first Dunleavy budget was $4.76. The second Dunleavy budget was $4.64. The third Dunleavy budget was $4.67. And now we're at the fourth and final, at least of the first term Dunleavy budgets. He proposed a budget that's $50 million below what his budget last year was, 4.62. And now we're at the stage where the legislature's got their hands on it and they're starting to deal with it. And the House Finance Committee has in front of it their proposed committee substitute for the budget, which would be $4.77 billion. These are all exclusive of the PFD. I always do the PFD off to the side,
right,
to try to confuse things. The legislature always includes the PFD. So when they talk about UGF numbers, they talk about higher UGF numbers because they're throwing in the PFD numbers. And so they've proposed a budget of $4.77 billion. But they've taken a week off to wait for the spring revenue forecast, which is due out early next week, may come out late this week, due out early next week. I took a look at what that spring revenue forecast is going to look like in last week's landmine column, the Friday column I do for the Alaska landmine, and it's going to have substantially higher revenues than what's been forecast before. And a concern is that the reason that the House Finance Committee has taken the week off to wait for the spring revenue forecast is because they want to spend a whole lot more than even the $4.77 billion, the $150 million increase that they've already proposed over the governor's proposed budget.
Well, and just for a second, Brad, I mean, even going back to last week, things have changed so dramatically here in the last week. Even the numbers you were talking about last week could be low compared to what things could look like coming up into the spring based on what we have right now, right?
They could be. Now, people sort of jump and say, oh, it's $130 oil. That doesn't mean $130 oil average for a full year. For FY22, we've got oil prices down as low as in the 50s at the beginning of the current fiscal year. And so it's the average prices you look at. For FY23, we're still in backwardation, which means the current price is higher than the futures prices. And while the FY23 average is coming up, it's not jumping up as fast as we're seeing these daily prices jump up. So you don't want to make the mistake of saying, oh, it's up so much currently, that means FY23 is going to be up the same amount. It's not. It's how the average moves up. I post daily,
right,
on both the Facebook page and the Twitter page, what the futures market is telling us about where the average price is for not only this fiscal year but next fiscal year and the 3 or 4 fiscal years beyond that, to try to get some sort of context of what we're looking at. And you can see there that the average prices are coming. The average prices from the futures market are coming up, but they're not coming up to the levels or as fast as we're seeing the current.
There's
prices.
always a lag time, right, and all that, right?
Well, and the market's anticipating that while we're going through the current crisis, there will be some solutions to the current crisis over time, right? And that will help drive prices back down. Either we'll lose demand, or we'll have an increase in supply, or a combination of both,
right?
Which will help drive the price back down. So it's not so much lag as it is sort of an anticipation of how the market's going to respond to the current price levels.
Okay, sorry, sidebar over. Just wanted to.
No, that's okay. The one thing that while I have this chart up, I want to note is in each of these years from FY20 on, we've had PFD cuts. I mean, it's not that we've had solid financials even at the spending levels that we've been at. Each year we've had significant PFD cuts. In FY19 we had 830 million. FY20 FY19 we had 830 million. FY20 we had 890 million. FY21 Dunleavy 820 million, and then FY21 1.23 billion. Dunleavy's proposed budget was significantly had a significant PFD cut in it even this year. So we've had PFD cuts through, and as you were pointing out earlier, even with the energy relief payment that the House has proposed, which we've got in the chart in green, even with that energy relief payment, we've still got $1 billion PFD cut. So the legislature continues to finance, even with these high oil prices. The legislature is continuing to finance a part of government with PFD cuts. They're continuing to take a significant cut out of the statutory PFD as they put these budgets together. That's not ending. Even when they tell you, well, there's an adage I won't use on the air, but even when they tell you they're doing good things for you, they're still even when they tell you it's raining, they're still doing something.
Right,
else.
right. They're still pissing all over you as soon as they're saying it's raining. I get you. I mean, we can say that. That's fine. And that's exactly what I was trying to say earlier. I mean, this is exactly the modus operandi of the business as usual crowd in there. Be happy that we gave you what we gave you. We know it's not what we were supposed to give you. We know that we could ignore the law, but we still know better than you.
We'll be coming back to this chart throughout the legislative cycle to talk about what's going on. But right now at 4.77, we're still higher than we've been in any year during the Dunleavy administration. We're going back to Walker, and this is just the House proposal. This is before House Finance actually acts on it,
right?
Or the House acts on it, or Senate Finance or Senate. This is the House, the pending what came out of the House committees that's pending before the legislature at 4.77. We're going to see whether the legislature actually can keep costs down when revenues are going up. Remember, they all said, "Oh, we're going to learn the lesson. costs are independent of revenues. We're going to keep costs down. We're going to keep spending down, even if revenues go back up. Well, we're going to follow along with this chart and see if that's actually what happens. All right, I'm going to try to back out of the chart now.
All right. So as Brad backs out of the chart, we're going to come back over here, and we'll continue. So again, how does this play out in your mind, Brad?
Well, I think the legislature. I think we're going to see a lot of activity in the House. Hopefully, we're going to see people advocate for a substantial PFD because we can afford a substantial PFD. I mean, they've told us all these years that we can't afford the PFD, right? I mean, the reason we're not getting the statutory PFD is because we can't afford it. Well, the revenues are going to be there to be able to afford the full PFD and the full statutory PFD. Rob Myers just made a good point in the chat room that actually revenues are FY22 revenues are getting so high that we probably could fund government and the full statutory PFD without taking a draw from the permanent fund earnings reserves.
Right.
So, we're going to, they've told us all these years, we can't afford a full PFD because we don't have the revenues. Now we're going to have the revenues. We're going to see what story starts, what story they start using now. Well, now we got the revenues, but we're not going to pay you a full PFD. And, you look at the House, and we're even going to try to get away with establishing the precedent of a 25-75 PFD. What's the because we don't want to give it to you because, we need to do something else with that money. We need to spend it on this, that, or the other thing. We're going to see what the stories are from this point forward as the revenues have come up. And it's going to be a test of whether, however you want to term the Republicans in the House, including Kelly Merrick and including Sarah Rasmussen, who don't belong to the Republican minority, we're going to see whether those Republicans, in fact, are fiscal conservatives and can constrain spending even as revenues come up. This is going to be a good test of that. It's great to have the test before an election cycle. Yeah.
Now, let me say this. Some of them will say, well, I am a fiscal conservative. That's why I'm not giving a full PFD. I'm going to hold back on this because that is the sound fiscal thing to do. I'm not going to give a full PFD because we can't afford it going into the future. So I am a fiscal conservative. I can already see the arguments being run up.
Yeah, that's going to be humorous because the PFD cut is a tax, right? And so they're going to tell you that they have to continue to tax you, but they're taxing you in the way that has the largest adverse impact on middle and lower income Alaska families and has the largest adverse impact on the economy. So what those quote fiscal conservatives are going to be telling you then is we have to continue, even with all these revenues, we have to continue to tax you, and we have to continue to tax you in the worst possible way in order to continue to do whatever they think they're doing. So I don't see a good storyline for these fiscal conservatives, so-called fiscal conservatives, in the days ahead. Either they're going to continue to tax by continuing to cut the PFD, or they're going to spend all that money and tell you, well, we still can't afford a PFD because we spend it all on something else.
Right. Exactly. All right. Well, I guess that moves us on to number 2. Give me a tease for the inflationary factor and how it's going to affect us.
So one of the next things we're going to start hearing out of the legislature is, inflation. We have to start spending more because of inflation. Inflation is going to drive up spending, and that's the justification for all this additional spending you're going to see. There are market measures of inflation, just like there is the futures market for oil that gives you some estimates of what market participants think future oil prices are going to be. There are similar measures, market measures, of what market participants think inflation is going to be. And we're going to look at those, and they're not the 7 and 10% we're going to hear some people talk about when they try to justify increased spending. They are much lower numbers. And we'll talk about those when we come back.
Brad Keithley, our guest, Alaska's 4 Sustainable Budgets. We continue in just a moment. Make sure you come check us out on Facebook, facebook.com/Michael Duke Show, if you want to participate in the between shows with our questions and talks with Brad. We will continue with the weekly top 3 right after this. Don't go anywhere.
Our light, our guide, and our trusted friend. Michael Duke Show.
All right, we're in the break right now. Brad Keithley is our guest. This is going to be interesting. And Brad, I liked how you framed this argument. You know, that people are going to show whether they're true fiscal conservatives. I mean, this will be an available talking point for anybody who's running for re-election. And it gives us a good opportunity to point out where people have fallen short of that fiscal conservancy.
Yeah, and it's going to be, I mean, the spotlight's going to be on Sarah Rasmussen and Kelly Merrick. Both of them are on House Finance. The question, what I'm going to be looking closely for, is how Sarah Rasmussen and Kelly Merrick vote on proposals to increase spending. I mean, we've already seen that the House Finance Committee substitute that's in front of House Finance right now is an increase of about $150 million. Over what Dunleavy proposed, and we've already seen that it's an increase over the budgets we've had during the past 2 years. But how are they going to vote? How are Kelly and Sarah going to vote on these things as they come up before House Finance? How are they going to vote on these issues when they come up before the House? And frankly, we're going to see whether they're actual fiscal conservatives or not. Same thing's true of the remainder of the committee. I mean, you've got Bryce on there, you've got, Neil Foster, you've got others on there who claim to be fiscal conservatives, and we'll see what they do. But the spotlight, I mean, Sarah Rasmussen wanted to be on House Finance, good for her. The spotlight's going to be on her about what she's going to do as these proposals come up for additional spending.
Well, and I think we're going to need to work very hard to show people that that's exactly what we've been talking about this whole time, that is exactly what's going on, and this is where the rubber meets the road, and they've got to step up, and if they don't step up now, we're going to be, we'll get exactly what we deserve in that regard.
Yeah, we're gonna see, step by step. That's why I created this chart. One of the reasons I created this chart, to be able to follow step by step what's going on with the budget as we go through the remainder of the session, and compare it to what's been done in prior years, compare it to what the governor proposed, and we're going to see how tight a leash these guys are going to hold on spending levels as we walk through the process.
Jimmy asked in the chat room, and this is a question that comes up quite frequently, and you've actually answered it before, but I will ask it again because it comes up so frequently. And it says, Brad, are we getting enough for our oil? That's a question. And I think you and I have had this discussion several times. But are we getting enough? Is there money on the table?
So at lower oil prices, the answer is I think yes. Looking at industry standards, looking at what the cost structure and everything else, I think there was money being left on the table at the lower oil prices. What happens as we increase in oil price is the progressivity provisions of SB 21 kick in, and the state takes more and more and more and more at higher oil prices. We're now, at lower oil prices, we were getting roughly 35. Let's say in the $50 range, we were getting roughly $35 million per $1 increase in the barrel of oil. So if oil prices went up by $1, that meant $35 million to the state at the additional dollars to the state on an annual basis. At the price levels that we're operating at now, we're in the $85 million range. So an increase of a price of a barrel of oil at this level by $1 increases the state's take by $85 million. And so as we step up and as the progressivity features kick in, I think it's probably that we're probably in the ballpark of what is reasonable at these price levels. Where I think we've been falling short is what happens at the lower ends of the price range.
So the progressivity portion of it is wonky. Essentially, we're getting the right amount when it's high oil, but at the low oil, we're getting a little bit of a sticky stick.
Yeah, I think that's the fair characteristic, and that's the reason, frankly, I supported ballot measure 1 last election cycle, because we were in a low price cycle, and I think we needed to address it. I did not think that ballot measure 1 in particular was the right solution, but the way the ballot measures operate is if you pass it, the legislature could modify it. It sort of opens up the subject and forces the legislature to deal with it. It puts a stop behind it. If the legislature doesn't deal with it, the ballot measure kicks in. So I think we needed to address it, and I still think we need to address it at lower price levels. But now that we're in a higher price regime, as long as we stay in that higher price regime, I think the progressivity is capturing a lot more of the value per barrel and making it a lot closer to a fair split.
And that aligns, of course, in part with what Mike Shower was talking about in the Fiscal Policy Working Group, with his saying, $200 or $300 million more. That could all be addressed with that. It's good stuff. Brad Keithley's our guest. Let's jump back into it. Like and share this video. The Michael Duke Show. All right, welcome back to the program. We're continuing now the weekly top 3. Brad Keithley, Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets, is our guest, and we're going through the weekly top 3. We're moving on to number 2. We just finished up with House Finance's budget. Now we're talking about the inflation factor and what does it mean for the state as they're going to try and increase the spending to offset that inflation. Brad, what's your take?
Well, I think we're going to start hearing a lot of discussion in the legislature about, oh my gosh, inflation's exploding. With high oil prices, that does drive inflation to a degree. And we're going to hear the offset to high oil prices, the offset to high revenues, is all of a sudden, we're going to have higher costs, inflation costs, and that we need to account for increased spending as a result of inflation. There are market measures of inflation, just like there is the futures market to give you a snapshot in time of what market participants think oil prices are going to be. There is essentially a futures market for inflation, and it operates around the treasury markets. The Treasury publishes, Treasury has 2 different bonds. One bond is indexed for inflation. Another bond is not indexed for inflation. The difference between the two can be used as a measure for inflation. The Federal Reserve Bank of St. Louis publishes those on a regular basis, and it calls it the break-even rate, and says that the break-even rate implies what market participants expect inflation to be in the next period, depending upon which bond you're using. You can go to the information that the St. Louis Fed publishes, and you can see those market inflation rates, or you can see those break-even rates. They're published for 5 years, 7 years, and 10 years. So when somebody starts saying, "Oh, inflation's going to be 7%, we have to start factoring in 7% inflation in the budget," you can go, just like you can with the crude markets. You can go to the futures market and try to determine what the inflation rate is for the 5 years. Just to give you the numbers, for the 5 years, the future Fred, the Federal Reserve Bank of St. Louis, the publishing that does, Fed says the current inflation rate, break-even inflation rate for 5 years is 3.29%. The current inflation rate for 7 years, over 7 years, is 2.69%, and the inflation rate over the 10-year period is 2.77%. Nothing anywhere close. Higher, elevated during 5 years, for the 5 years, but nothing even close to the 7 years that I anticipate we're going to hear people talking about.
Brad Keithley, Alaskans, Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets. We're continuing to talk about the weekly top three. How does inflation in the long, I mean, so give us a long run view of what the inflation could potentially do in that regard.
So the governor's budget was assumed a 1% inflation. His 10-year plan assumed 1% inflation and had growth over 1 year inflation. Even at the time that came out, inflation was higher. And so I used 10-year number from the then 10-year number from Fred, which was about 2.5%, and showed inflation growth over that period. And layer in the work I've been doing since is increased revenues from higher oil prices on top of that increased spending, or on top of that inflation adjusted 10-year plan. And we're still showing that we can afford at least a 50-50 without having to adjust that because of increased spending due to inflation. When you elevate the inflation levels, when you use 2.77 now instead of the 2.5, that's going to affect it at the margin. But that's how we need to be looking at this. We don't need to be looking at $130 oil and think that's going to last 10 years. And everybody jumped to one side of the boat and saying, oh my gosh, we're saved because we got $130 oil for 10 years. Just like we shouldn't be doing that. We shouldn't be saying, oh my gosh, inflation's 7% now. It's going to be that for 10 years. We got to adjust everything for 10 years. We can't give PFDs because we're going to have to take into account that inflation is going to be at that high rate over the 10 years. We've got market measures for this. Just like we've got market measures for oil, we've got market measures for inflation. And as we go through this discussion, as people try to claim that we need to increase spending to account for inflation, we're going to need to keep them tied down, just like we do on the oil side. Just like when we say, no, it's not $130 for 10 years. This is what the market is telling us for 10 years. We're going to have to do that also on the inflation side and keep them tied down and say, no, it's not 7% for 10 years. This is what the market's telling us. The 10-year inflation, the market expectation of 10-year inflation right now is 2.77%.
Brad Keithley, Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets. This leads us into number 3, which gives us an opportunity to wrap things up on time today. So let's talk about that, Brad.
So the Alaska Public Offices Commission, APOC, which governs campaign contributions and campaign finance, issued a decision last week that said that all bets are off, all limits are off. This follows a Ninth Circuit decision which had rejected Alaska's campaign limits as I think it's appropriate to say is outdated, because they hadn't adjusted for inflation. They hadn't adjusted the amounts for inflation as inflation had gone along. They've been stuck at the same levels for a number of years, and so APOC, following that Ninth Circuit decision, had initially said, okay, what we're going to do is we're going to adjust the contribution levels for inflation for over a period of time, and those are going to be the new numbers. But there's no authority in statute that gives APOC the authority to adjust those numbers for inflation. The statute reads as a flat amount, and so the question was whether that was an appropriate reading or an appropriate action by APOC to put those limitations in. And so APOC this past week reversed its decision on putting in these artificial limits, the limits that they had determined that were not based in statute. Reversed the decision and said, well, we don't have statutory authority to do anything, and so they released all of the campaign limits. And what we've got now is a situation in which Alaska has no campaign limits, no campaign finance limits, no limits on contributions that can be given to candidates at the state level or at the local level, those campaign limits are completely gone. That's similar to a situation in Oregon, and in the ADN story, in the Nat Hertz story on this issue. He quotes a guy from Oregon, a lawyer from Oregon, has been observing what happened to Oregon when they did the same thing. And it says, unlimited contributions are going to lead to, just like we've seen in the Oregon legislature, big money really beginning to stymie good policy. If you guys go to super high limits, and we have no limits now. I mean, APOC's taken out all the limits. If you go to super high limits, you're going to see bad public policy as a result, and you're going to have elected officials who are more beholden to the big money interests up there. Well, we already have a problem with elected officials bending over backwards to meet the expectations of their campaign donors. I mean, that's what we've seen with the PFD. We've seen the legislature choose the revenue package, the revenue approach that has the largest adverse effect on middle and lower income Alaska families. And if we now go to unlimited campaign contributions directly to candidates, which is where APOC has put us, or where the Ninth Circuit has put us, and now APOC has put us, I think we're going to see even more of that sort of big money influence on the legislature. Well, it's something I hope the legislature addresses before they're done. If they don't, we're going to have a lot of money flowing into our state level and legislative. Well,
and I'll say this. I mean, yesterday I pontificated on this a bit. I'm a bit torn because I'm all about free speech, and I think people should be able to. I think people should be able to utilize their monies as a form of free speech. But I am concerned about excessive money coming in. But somebody made a point to say, well, all those outside special interest PACs, they don't have to really disclose who all the contributors are, just the top three. And so it gets a little more confuddled. It might be better if politicians had to do it, and then they had to make sure that they were disclosing. But I guess we'll pick this up at another time. Brad Keithley, Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets, thank you for coming on board, my friend.
Michael, as always, thanks for having me.
All right, folks, we're going to continue here during the break. We're going to restart the simulcast. Apparently, we've got some audio issues we're going to come back to, but we'll return. The radio side is fine, and so we'll continue to talk with all of you here in just a moment. The Michael Duke Show continues. Chris Story coming up in hour 2, plus your phone calls. We'll be back with more in just a moment. Okay, so I don't know exactly what happened, but all of a sudden the volume to the radio and to the broadcast, to the regular broadcast facilities are all fine. Levels are all fine there, but all of a sudden all the levels to my broadcast software and from Zoom and everything else is super low. So people can't even hear it. I'm looking at the waveform of my recording and it's teeny tiny. And so I don't know if it was the Zoom or something or what. This is the first time we've used Zoom in a long term. So we'll have to double check this, but I'm going to have to restart the broadcast. So Brad, if you want to hold down for a second, yep. We're going to, I'll see if I can bring Brad back up here in just a moment. In fact, I'm going to leave the chat room with Brad and I will be back with more. Don't go anywhere. The Michael Duke Show continues. Your home for common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio. Back with more in just a hot second.